Hello, this is Erin with the Joy in Pens and Paper, and it is a 3 Inks Thursday. In a 3 Inks Thursday video, what I do is I swatch 3 different inks on 3 different papers, and then I use 3 different size nibs to do a little writing sample so that I can look at it, reflect, talk about it, compare, etc. The 3 papers that I will be using today are bank paper, Rhodia paper, and Tomoe River paper. The Tomoe River paper is within a Galen Leather Co. Everyday Notebook. And I do pre-cut up like this right here, the strips. And so that's where right now I have a stream of Rhodia going on. Perhaps in the next batch that I cut up will be Cosmo Air Light paper. But that's why recently it's been Rhodia, in case anyone was wondering. The 3 nib sizes, I'm going to continue to use the TWSBI Eco Go, which has this lovely spring mechanism. I have this pen in a fine, medium, and stub nib. And then I am also continuing the trend of going through the Diamine Inkvent calendar inks. And today is Lullaby. This is a standard ink. So I will be swatching that in the middle. Now the 2 inks that I'm comparing it to, both of them are Ferris Wheel Press inks, and I believe, and I'm very interested to see how it plays out on these papers, but I believe it's the same base color and one just has shimmer and one does not. Again, I could be wrong, but it's kind of similar to, I think Ferris Wheel Press, Goose Poupon and Queen and Castle, I think, are the same base color, but one has shimmer. Again, could be wrong. Happy to admit when I'm wrong. So the first, and one has a shimmer. This one has a shimmer. Let me just make sure I get it in the right order. So there's Little Robinia will be the first one, and then the last one will be the Purple Jade Rabbit. Right? Is it that? Yes. Okay. And I also will be using a Kakimori Brass Nib dip pen to do these swatches, and an Inkapet to hold my sample vial. This is having a hard time grabbing the paper because of the angle. Just realizing I was very quiet there for a second. Okay, so I have my 3 swatches. I'm always just fine if the swatches are messy, for lack of a better word. And then with the fine nib, I'm going to write the brand, which is Ferris Wheel Press. And then with the medium, I will write the name of the ink, Little Robinia. And I am seeing some really lovely chromo shading on these papers. I don't believe I anticipated chromo shading. So I'm very intrigued by that. I also believe both of these samples, yes, both of these samples are from the Ink Journal Ink Flight monthly subscription. but they came in different subscriptions. Okay, next is Diamine Lullaby. And this is a lot pinker than what I expected. So I generally, but it's a very lubricated ink. And I do find Ferris Press to be a little on the drier side, but just the way that it came off the nib here, it's quite lubricated. Previously used, and I'm working on migrating out of it, a Wearingeul swatch book that did not have the paper type specified. There's that shimmer. And, oh, what am I doing? Focus. Anywho. So as this series shows, inks react differently on different papers. So when I'm looking at the Wearingeul swatch book to determine if inks are similar and I want to do a 3-ink swatching with them, there are definitely times that when I get into this book and on these papers, it is a swing and a miss. And that's perfectly fine. This might be one of those times, although I can see a little pinkiness coming through here that's similar. But there's also time for it to dry down. So this is called Lullaby. I'm also thinking of Fountain Pen Insanity passed along a little bottle of Colorverse Anita, and I do not have it readily available, but this also looks very similar to Anita for me. And perhaps when I finish up this Diamine series, I can go back through and do a comparison, because there's another ink that I'm picturing that would also be kind of a really good match, a little bit darker, a little bit more saturated than Lullaby. So that's what I love about doing this series, is I just get to play with my ink and I get to see what colors are similar and in what ways are they similar and how are they different and how are they in the writing. So this one does have shimmer, as I already said. I just agitated it. I will not be re-agitating. Oop. I was going right into the alphabet. So Ferris Wheel Press. Is this Purple Jade Rabbit? Yes, the Purple Jade Rabbit. And then the stub nib to do the alphabet. Okay, so here are my 3 swatches. Certainly Lullaby is leaning more the pink than the purple compared to these other swatches. Breaking it down top to bottom, Little Robinia as I said when I started, it has this almost chromo shading effect where this blue is coming through as well as a bit of pink that's similar to Lullaby. And then it does have this really lovely light purple. But the color gradation or the chromo shading is really interesting and really pretty. In the writing sample, you actually can see just a little bit of the blue haloing around the edges of the letters, as well as some of the lightness of the pink. The second ink, Lullaby, from the Diamine ink vent, it's this really pretty pink with a bit of a purple lean is kind of the best that I can describe it. It's not a mauve. It is really in the pink family, but on the Rhodia paper, it's a bit more purple, and it's also just looks really unsaturated or desaturated, which is fascinating because if I remember correctly, and obviously I'm an imperfect human, but I don't believe I re-dipped the nib between the swatches. I could be wrong though. So that, if my memory is correct, it's interesting that this is such a solid, smooth sample or swatch right here, and this is so scarce. It's almost like the color's disappearing on the Rhodia paper. And in the writing, it's pretty standard. There's not a whole lot of shading or anything else going on. Then Purple Jade Rabbit, it is very similar to Little Robinia. I would go out on a limb and say I do think it's the same base color. I really do, especially when you're looking at this right here. It has some of the same chromo shading going on, and just the coloring is very similar. It's different on the Rhodia paper, I will absolutely give you that, but I did have such a hard time getting the ink to come off the brass nib pen because of how dry it is on the Rhodia paper. But this is a much lighter color, so that's interesting. And then on the bank paper, you're getting a lot more of this haloing coming out, and you're not getting it a whole lot there. So again, this swatching on different papers is such a fascinating project because you're just able to see all these differences. I could look at these two inks on the Tomoe River paper and support my theory of this is the same base color ink, it's just one has shimmer and one does not. But then I'm looking at that same ink and I would not make that same statement if I'm using Rhodia paper, nor would I make that same statement if I'm using bank paper. I also, if I'm looking at Lullaby and I had the same, or I swatched this ink on Rhodia alongside any of these other two papers, I would say this is not the same ink color as was used on the other. So that's also fascinating. Now the writing sample for Purple Jade Rabbit is coming through a little bit more purple, and the Little Robinia does have a little bit more pink. So perhaps that's another difference to the that specific composition of ink properties. All three are pretty legible in the writing. I would say the Purple Jade Rabbit is the lightest of the three, but even Lullaby being on the lighter side is still legible even with a fine nib pen. So that is number 46 of the 3 Inks Thursday. I hope that you enjoyed this. If you did, please feel free to give it a thumbs up and let me know that this is content you like. That also kind of pushes it out for other people that are still exploring this hobby or newer to it and looking for some content. Or don't, that's fine too. Honestly, I appreciate that you're taking the time to view it. If you made it this far, I also really appreciate that, especially because at this point I'm rambling. And with that, I'm going to sign off and say, I hope to see you in the next one.